Saturn shouldn't be producing any sound at all. Space is a vacuum, and sound can't travel through a vacuum. And yet, right now, scientists are listening to an eerie recording of Saturn, humming a real signal picked up by a NASA spacecraft buried inside data for years before anyone noticed it. That hum turned out to be something researchers only recently realized they'd been missing this whole time, a completely new type of radio signal that doesn't match anything else Saturn produces. Nobody can fully explain where it comes from, and that's just the opening act. This is a planet with a storm shaped like a perfect hexagon that shouldn't be able to exist, rings that are almost certainly the wreckage of a destroyed moon, and an atmosphere that roughly every 30 years, without fail, tears itself apart in a storm so massive the entire Earth could fit inside it. Stick with this, because by the end, you'll understand exactly why scientists keep calling Saturn one of the strangest objects in the entire solar system. Start with that sound, because understanding how it exists at all is the key to understanding why its so strange sound needs a medium to travel through air water. Something physical, space is empty, so under normal circumstances there should be nothing to hear out there at all. But Saturn isn't silent because it has an enormous magnetic field that behaves almost like a giant natural antenna. When the solar wind, a constant stream of charged particles from the sun, slams into Saturn's magnetosphere, it generates powerful radio emissions near the planet's poles. These aren't sound waves. In the traditional sense, they're electromagnetic radio waves. But scientists can take that radio data and shift it down into a frequency range. Human ears can actually hear exactly what NASA did with data collected by the Cassini spacecraft. The result is that eerie pulsing hum you may have heard associated with Saturn around Halloween, a genuine sonification of real data, not something invented for spooky season. This particular radio signal from Saturn has been recorded and studied for decades. Scientists were used to it. They knew its general rhythm, its typical pulse. But in 2022, a team of researchers went back through the old Cassini data archives and found something that had apparently been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Buried inside years of recordings was a completely different kind of signal, one that didn't match Saturn's usual radio behavior at all. It was officially named Saturn Anomalous Microtrick Radiation. Described in a peer-reviewed paper published in the journal Geophysical Research Letters in August 2022. The research team, led by scientist S.Y. Wu, identified 193 separate events of this signal across the entire Cassini mission archive. Here's what makes it so strange. Saturn's normal radio emissions follow a predictable pattern tied closely to the planet's rotation and its interaction with the solar wind. This new signal doesn't follow that pattern. It has its own distinct frequency, and it drifts over time in a way the regular emissions don't. Some of these events lasted 11 hours or longer. Imagine Saturn having a normal, steady heartbeat that scientists have listened to for decades, and then suddenly noticing that every so often a completely different rhythm starts playing on top of it, coming from somewhere else for reasons nobody has nailed down yet. Researchers know it's coming from somewhere near Saturn based on how its intensity changes with distance. But the exact mechanism producing it and why it behaves so differently from the planet's usual output remains an open question in planetary science today. Here's a thought experiment that puts this whole silence and sound situation into perspective. What if space weren't a vacuum? What if sound could actually travel freely between planets? In that case, our biggest problem wouldn't be some distant hum from Saturn, it would be our own sun. NASA has also released an official sonification of the sun's radio vibrations, translated into audible sound. The same way Saturn's emissions were a deep, ominous hum generated by the sun's nonstop thermonuclear reactions, physicist Craig DeForest actually ran the numbers on this. He calculated that if space were filled with a medium capable of carrying sound the way air does on Earth, the sun would be blasting our planet with roughly 100 decibels of continuous noise. For perspective, that's roughly the sound of a motorcycle running at full throttle a few feet from your head. Except imagine one of those motorcycles positioned over every single square meter of Earth's surface, all running constantly forever. The only reason we're not living inside that nightmare is the enormous mercy of the vacuum of space. Silence in this case is doing us an enormous favor. Strange as that radio signal is, it isn't actually Saturn's biggest mystery. The title goes to something sitting directly above one of its poles, a shape that, according to basic physics, simply shouldn't be able to exist. Perfect geometric shapes are about the last thing you'd expect to find on a gas giant defined by chaotic winds and constantly churning storm clouds. And yet, right now, sitting at Saturn's North Pole is a massive storm system shaped almost perfectly like a hexagon. It's remained one of the great unsolved mysteries of the solar system for decades. The hexagon spans a diameter more than twice the width of Earth. At its very center sits a swirling polar vortex that looks almost like a giant eye staring out into space, surrounded by winds racing up to 310 mph, several times more powerful than the strongest hurricanes and tornadoes ever recorded on Earth. Planetary scientist Kevin Baines has openly described this hexagon as one of Saturn's greatest ongoing mysteries. Under the normal laws of fluid dynamics, any vortex spinning in a liquid or gas should naturally settle into a circle. Circles are the default shape nature tends to favor for rotating fluid systems. But this structure has stubbornly kept its sharp, six-sided edges for more than 4 decades, ever since it was first spotted by NASA's Voyager spacecraft back in 1981. Detailed images, captured later by Cassini, clearly show the true scale of this storm relative to the rest of the planet, and honestly, it looks almost artificial. Like a geometric shape, someone deliberately carved into a raging ocean of gas. What makes it even stranger is that the entire hexagon rotates together as one unified structure, essentially ignoring the surrounding atmospheric chaos around it. That sounds almost impossible to believe, but researchers have actually managed to recreate a version of this effect in a laboratory setting, carefully adjusting the rotation speed of a tank of water, which does produce similar polygon-shaped patterns in the fluid. That experiment helps explain the basic physical principle behind how a shape like this can initially form. What it doesn't explain is why Saturn's version has remained so remarkably stable for over 40 straight years without breaking down into chaos, the way almost everything else in that atmosphere eventually does. Nothing like this hexagon has ever been observed on any other planet in our solar system. As far as we currently know, Saturn is the only world where atmospheric turbulence somehow organizes itself into strict lasting geometry. It's worth noting just how difficult it was to even get a clear look at the storm in the first place. The hexagon sits at Saturn's North Pole, a region that spent years shrouded in winter darkness during parts of the Cassini mission. Since each of Saturn's seasons lasts roughly 7 Earth years thanks to its 30-year orbit, Cassini's cameras had to wait patiently through years of darkness before sunlight finally returned to the North Pole in 2009, allowing the spacecraft to capture the hexagon in full, clear detail for the first time. Before that, scientists had to rely on infrared instruments capable of detecting heat signatures even without visible sunlight, essentially letting Cassini see in the dark. That kind of technical patience, waiting years for the right lighting conditions on a planet nearly 1 billion miles away, is part of what makes discoveries like this possible at all. Now let's talk about the rings, because what we thought we knew about Saturn's rings has also completely changed in recent years. And honestly, it might be the most dramatic twist in the entire story. It's hard to picture Saturn without its rings. They're basically the planet's signature, the reason it's instantly recognizable in any photo. But here's the twist for most of Saturn's existence. It didn't have rings at all. Saturn itself is roughly 4-5 billion years old, but its iconic ring system appears to be shockingly young, possibly only around 100 to 200 million years old, meaning the rings may have formed at a point when dinosaurs were still walking around on Earth. In 2022, planetary scientist Jack Wisdom of MIT published research proposing that Saturn's rings aren't simply leftover dust from the planet's original formation, as scientists long assumed. Instead, they appear to be the wreckage of a genuine cosmic catastrophe. According to this model, Saturn once had another large icy moon, which researchers named Chrysalis mathematical simulations suggest this moon orbited Saturn stably for billions of years, but over time, gravitational interactions with Saturn's largest moon titan gradually destabilized Chrysalis's orbit, slowly pulling it out of its stable path. Eventually, Chrysalis drifted too close to Saturn, and the planet's powerful tidal forces tore it apart completely. Most of the moon's mass burned up as it fell into Saturn's atmosphere, but roughly 1 of its icy debris remained in orbit, spreading out into the flat, glittering disk we now recognize as Saturn's rings.